Okay, my name is Chris DePuy of the market research company 650 Group, and I will be the moderator for today's panel. Just so you know a little bit about 650 Group, we publish syndicated research in 31 different areas of the technology industry, and it's my pleasure to host today. So let's start with the topic today. First of all, I want to share with you that I'm very excited about the prospects for enterprise cellular. There are many different approaches to building and operating cellular networks, specifically made for private organizations. And each of our panelists today has a lot of experience in the wireless industry, and we hope to learn more about the markets and the panelists' companies. So let's get started. I'd like each of you, as I call on you, to briefly explain how your company participates in the private LTE and CBRS market. And then also, please explain whether your company provides a service or products or both. And if it's not too much, would you please also just share some, like a recent announcement your company might have made. And so I'd like to ask Karim. Karim, please start off.
Thank you. So my name is Karim Malki, and I'm the founder of Athonet, and I manage Athonet's US business. What we do, we like to call it the network engine. We do what is called in telco wording, though enterprises certainly don't like that. So is the core network, which combined with the radio and of course spectrum is what you need to create a private LTE network and 5G. And we do that in both as a product, but also as a service, in that we were amongst the earliest to put our core on the cloud. And because we could see that the flexibility and the automation that you could get with the cloud was amazing. I think the telco world has realized that, and I think we'll all be talking about bridging between the telco and the business world. We won 4 Global Mobile Awards in 2019, which was rather incredible for the telco domain in understanding that the cloud was a way forward. And really recently, we've launched our 5G core running on the cloud, on the AWS cloud, just to break down the barriers, because I think we're all trying together here to create an ecosystem that works, and then makes it easy for enterprises to deploy. What we try to do is, hey, you have your devices, you have your radios, just connect them to the cloud, and it just works, just to show how easy it could be and how powerful it can be, while guaranteeing reliability, right, which is another important thing for enterprises.
Thanks very much, Karim. Todd, Landry from JMA, it's your turn to tell us about your company. Thank you.
Surely, Todd Landry. I lead a lot of the strategy and initiatives on the product technology front. For JMA Wireless, JMA started early on building LTE virtualized RAN technology and has it deployed in a lot of the operator side networks for many years now. We use that basis of a platform to build a fully scalable virtualized RAN for the private wireless CBRS world. We've been very deeply involved with the CBRS Alliance as we went through the process of rolling out the CBRS capabilities in the US. In terms of, we've got several projects going on all over the place. When we started, around the time of ICD, we were one of many to announce the first deployment. That was in American Dream, who needed a better way to interconnect digital signage around their entertainment mall facility. And we saved them a ton of time in getting that done. And we carved probably 70% of the cost out of it compared to terrestrial wiring capabilities. We've also been engaged very heavily in the U.S. Department of Defense initiatives. And you probably saw some recent announcements, some with my colleagues from Federated Wireless here, where we're awarded some of the first tranche of business in the Department of Defense space, which we think a lot about CBRS as an enterprise play, but remember the DoD has an extremely large scale deployment of facilities that require a lot of tracking, a lot of communication. So they're all moving towards that. So we're pretty pleased with some of that going on in the marketplace. The last thing I'll say is we, to Karim's point, this opportunity with the enterprises and CBRS is significant. And when we look at it, we have to think differently. We have to turn off our optics that look at, you know, the world like mobile network operators and mobile phones, and we have to turn on IT-centric thinking. So we've tried to build a platform that is very sliceable, very scalable, so that enterprise can take advantage of the wide swath of spectrum today and forthcoming, and they can slice it up in a way or segment in a way to apply it to different use cases inside their enterprise. So very happy to be here with you guys today.
Thanks, Todd. I'd like to ask Oguz from ONF to please explain more about ONF and your involvement.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sunay. I'm the VP of R&D at ONF, and I oversee all mobile-related projects. So in this context, since last year, we have been busy developing Ether, which is our open source distributed cloud, cloud-native, programmable connectivity and edge cloud management platform for enterprises. So we have been developing this with maximal flexibility in mind, both from a cloud utilization perspective, so in that we are cloud agnostic, but also in terms of the business models that Ether can support. So it is possible to leverage Ether for a completely independent enterprise operated solution, but it is also possible for operators to pick it up and leverage Ether to provide service to enterprises. In those two extremes, any middle ground is also possible with Ether. So one of the most important things about this project is it is unlike traditional open source projects, we have also operationalized Ether early on. So we are both the developer and the service provider for a pilot network today. And the pilot network is distributed around the globe with many edge sites. And as I mentioned, this is a distributed cloud solution. So there is a central cloud portion that helps us control the Ether network around the globe. So as such, from a connectivity perspective, the mobile core control plane runs from the central cloud. But at the same time, for edge cloud management, we have an Ether management platform that allows us to do operational control, lifecycle management, and global monitoring and logging capabilities. And at every enterprise site on premises, we have a hardware pod, and it can scale up and down depending on how much the enterprises want to utilize it. And that is built on commodity hardware, built on SDN principles. And it hosts all of the virtualized components of the RAN, as well as the mobile core user plane for local breakouts. And it is also an environment for edge applications and platforms that enterprises would like to utilize towards Industry 4.0.
Thanks, Oz. That's really interesting, and I'm sure a lot of people are sort of learning about this for the first time, so thanks for that. Boris, it is very nice to meet you. Boris from FreedomFI, would you please just share a little bit about yourself and your company?
Yeah, thank you guys. So Boris Renski, I am a co-founder and CEO at FreedomFI. What we do at FreedomFI is help folks build extremely cost-efficient private LTE and 5G networks by leveraging open source software and commodity hardware. We just recently announced the beta launch of our product. So in a nutshell, our product is a highly opinionated and managed distribution of an open source project called Magma that makes it super simple for anybody to just build their private LTE or 5G network. There are two pieces to the product. There is something that we call FreedomFi Gateway, which is a generic kind of x86 appliance that you can plug in virtually any small cell into. And then we offer kind of a management interface that is basically kind of the control plane and the network management for all the instances of the FreedomFi gateway that is running out there. And we very much attach ourselves to the, private LTE, private 5G, and various kind of greenfield LTE and 5G initiatives. But the long-term view behind the company is we believe that there's going to be ultimately the Linux of the network core, so to speak. And if you look today at the telecom stack, there's very little open source out there running in production, and certain elements of, I think, the telecom stack, specifically those that are lower level infrastructure type systems that are more or less ubiquitous across all deployments, lend themselves perfectly to the open source development model. And my personal background is actually very much in the open source cloud infrastructure space, where I saw open source move from, Linux to now being, the definition of everything cloud native. And with FreedomFi, we're basically looking to relive this, but in the telecom infrastructure stack.
Thanks, Boris. It's great to hear about your company. Deepak from Federated Wireless, I would like to hear more about you and Federated. Your turn, please.
Hello, my name is Deepak Das. I'm responsible for all our solutions in the CBRS space. Federated Wireless was founded in 2012. It has been an industry leader in shared spectrum. We formed not only drove the standards in WinForum, formed the CBRS Alliance, and over many trials, we had the commercial launch of CBRS earlier this year. We also deployed the industry's first ESC, that is the sensor network, that makes available the 150 megahertz of CBRS available nationwide. One of our most fruitful accomplishments has been working with many CBSD or radio vendors to qualify them with the CBRS technology on our spectrum controller framework. Earlier this year, we also launched a connectivity as a service, which complements our spectrum controller as a service, which is the SaaS. Our whole goal is to enable especially a lot of use cases in enterprise for both 4G and 5G. CBRS is capable of 5G and of course 4G. It has, I think the latest count is about 100,000 devices that are commercially deployed that are using the spectrum. So I'm pretty excited to be on this panel to listen to the insights of my friends here. I think this is an interesting point for private wireless networks. My friend Todd referred to the $600 million investment that the DoD is making in 5G technology, and we are working with him and other companies on the Albany Marine Corps logistics warehouse that is exploring, a lot of warehouse asset tracking, these kind of use cases, as well as an interesting announcement that came from one of our close partners, AWS. This was a security camera application on a private network, perfect use case where video analytics is being used for COVID-related workspace management. I look forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Thanks, Deepak. Juan from CommScope, it is your turn to tell us a bit about your company. And if you can just remind us, of a recent announcement you might have made that is relevant here. Thanks.
You got it. Juan Santiago from, I run the CBRS business at Ruckus, which recently became the enterprise business within CommScope. And CommScope is a $8 billion telecom company. So Ruckus is now part of CommScope. CommScope also happens to have a SaaS business, but I come from the part that does the radios. So as we talked about, radios is what provides the coverage. CBRS, we have, sometimes I call small cells. We were the first certified small cell out there for CBRS. We were actually started the alliance almost 4 years ago, and have been deploying networks even before the FCC even made it official this year. We stopped counting at about 100 networks out there. 90% of those done by enterprises on their own or as a service. Our entire business is through partners, so that we basically sell equipment that our partners then turn into a service either for the enterprise. And that's our approach to market. Recent developments, I think the most important one has been COVID-related learning remotely. Kids that don't have broadband at home and need to do their Zoom calls and their homework and so on. We have the ability, or our partners have been having the ability to extend those school networks out to the neighborhood around the school in order to provide broadband to those kids. So that's a great, feel-good story, and lots more coming on next year.
Thanks, Juan. I appreciate that. And Rajeev from Celona, please share with us a bit about your company and some recent news. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Well, a pleasure to be here with all of you. I have had the pleasure of working with a lot of gentlemen here in this call during my various roles. So this is fun to be on this panel today. Celona is a relatively young company. We are about an 18-month-old company. Actually proud to say probably the first startup exclusively funded for private mobile networks. So I think a lot of folks here should feel proud. You guys have contributed to us being alive. So thank you so much for giving us life. And the company is formed on a simple opinion that private mobile networks is such a significant opportunity and is so new that any past baggage is only going to slow us down. And so our belief is the entire solution, end to end, needs to be thought through with a purpose of removing all friction for adoption, number one. But number two, recognizing that the hero of this story is going to be slightly different than the heroes of the past story. I think the reason all these businesses want to deploy private mobile networks is in the end for some of these mission critical, business critical applications. And for the first time for the networking industry, the hero of the story is going to be the application developer. And when you take that extremely different lens on this, you really have to rethink how we did every part of the solution. And in the context of that, what we just announced actually just last week was the general availability of an entire integrated end-to-end solution thought through just for private mobile networks. And it's been a fun journey. We've been somewhat behind closed doors, talking to hundreds of customers. We have about 40 to 50, so I'm not yet stopping counting one, maybe soon. Deployments at this point done. And it's really fun. I think this entire panel, everybody here is representative of pretty transformational stuff happening in both the telecom industry and the enterprise networking industry. Two things that have kind of lived in parallel worlds for too long. I think it's time to bridge it together, as somebody else said. So excited to be here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thanks, Rajeev. Okay, so what I'd like to do is transition to a question that if I was to have reached out to each of the panelists, this would probably take me a couple weeks to do, but because everybody's here together today, I'd like to ask in 30 seconds or less, can each of you share with me in your recent experience, what are the top 3 uses for CBRS or private LTE/5G? And that way we can kind of put them all on the table. I realize that as we get to the last panelist, it might become a bit repetitive. So if you want to, I don't know, hit on a corner case, that would be fine. But thanks to the miracle of Zoom and such, the order has changed. So I'm just going to kind of work my way through. Well, it turns out that Karim's first on the list. So please share with us briefly some use cases you've seen for private cellular.
Yeah, thanks. So my white beard shows that we've been around for a while, so quite a lot. I'd say the big ones now, like Juan said earlier, schools, transport, airports, ports, certainly, and manufacturing. Those certainly we're seeing a lot because of the reliability needs that are there of coverage, connectivity platform.
Excellent. Thanks, Karim. Okay, Rajeev, you're up. What are the use cases from those 40 or 50 customers you're working with?
Yeah, I mean, I think the use cases tend to be a lot of real-time media in a variety of environments, ranging from, hospitals trying to still solve their clinical communications problems to the real-time video for any kind of, automation in the various industrial environments. So real-time media tends to dominate across verticals. So I think it's a really important theme. The second, I think, is, and this has gotten exaggerated in the COVID world, need for connectivity has stretched beyond for the four walls. And I think the distance learning application that both Juan and Karim referred to absolutely is top of mind. But there is a version of that in every industry. Logistics is starting to bleed outside, retail is starting to bleed outside. And so outdoor coverage of all types in every environment is a big theme as well that we are seeing. And the third, I would say, is the endpoint starting to move around. Things like autonomous guided vehicles and robots and fully automated warehouses is a big theme. We're running a lot of trials in that environment where the inherent challenges of coverage and mobility while providing predictability. This is really the technology tailor-made for it. I would say those are the three big themes we have been noticing.
That's interesting, Rajeev. Thank you. Oguz, would you care to share your views on use cases?
Sure. Well, one of the things that that with Ether we are starting is actually Ether is starting to be the foundation of a new DARPA project that along with Stanford, Cornell, and Princeton, ONF was awarded recently, and this research is about securing the national internet infrastructure. So, and it is a relatively large project to the extent that this is the largest project that DARPA has awarded to a single project since ARPANET. And you know where ARPANET led us. As a consequence, campus networks is something that as Ether we're starting to support. But in addition, we already talked about manufacturing. Warehousing is also an important use case. So wherever actually enterprises can leverage automation platforms of, especially those that include mission critical services, is going to be an important use case for private enterprise uses.
Thanks, Oguz. That's really interesting. Thanks for the reference to ARPANET. That was a good one. Todd, you're up. What kind of use cases what kind of use cases can you share with us? I know you've got a bunch of really good ones on your website, and you've been out public and with them, but we appreciate you sharing with us.
Yeah, no, not a problem. And I think a couple of things. One is the current world we live in is raising demand for something we sometimes operate under the guise of digital divide, really connecting the unconnected, particularly for students that need to continue their education. And we're deploying those kind of networks everywhere. And the funny thing about that is there's nothing really new and radical about those networks. It's broadband connectivity using CBRS. But it's very doable. It's very usable technology for that in an outdoor arena. Many of them that we're deploying with the cities and the statewide entities, however, look at it and say, I'll be able to utilize the foundation of this technology, this infrastructure, to then come in and layer over more smart end devices or end devices that connect things that normally aren't connected to make their cities and their states smarter. Everything from street light systems to stop and go lights to garbage cans. In the enterprise space, we touch many verticals, and someone mentioned, I think, AGVs. The industrial sector is a hot one right now, mainly because they still have to deliver. There's still demand for product in this current state, and they have to find ways to better optimize. You'll see a paper on our website. I published a short paper called CBRS Used in the World of Industry 4.0. And in Industry 4.0, everything is about operationalizing and creating new efficiencies in that system. Now, the funny thing is, I like to tell people, use cases aren't the verticals themselves. Use cases are not lower latency and higher speed and mobility. And in almost every enterprise I engage in, they see and smell CBRS and they get the data sheets, but they still don't know what to use it for. And we really, as an industry, need to appeal to their business use cases. I'm here in our office today because we've been doing live demos. And I'll literally do one later today with these on, and I will live stream what I'm looking at. And we will go in over CBRS, we will go in and we will do push-to-talk communications using these new Samsungs while we're visualizing a jet engine and working on a repair scenario of it. So it's these kinds of real use cases that are changing the game out there. Just thought I'd give you the eye candy on a real scenario.
Thanks for the props, Todd. That was terrific. Okay, Juan, please share with us what your over 100 customers are working on.
Sure. I just want to tell Todd that I did get a screenshot of him wearing the headset, so that's going to be out there. So, and like Todd, I do believe that you could talk about all kinds of verticals, and I'm towards the end, so a lot of them have been touched on, but maybe we ought to think about the why. Why do people look at CBRS when really Wi-Fi? I mean, we're a big provider of Wi-Fi in a lot of these situations. And you have to think about, if they have Wi-Fi, why are they choosing private cellular, right? Why are they doing that? And it really boils down to a few things. One is certainly coverage. With the rules in CBRS, you can just basically, you can go around the street, you can go for a mile outside of the school, several blocks into the neighborhood. So, and if you're in a mine and other places, those are all very important things. It's all about, the reach and the coverage. That's number one over Wi-Fi. And there's other things. Quality of service, I would say, is the second one. There's some applications like the headset that Todd was wearing that where you really need, and that's where things like latency come into play, but it's really all about the quality of experience. And, we have deployed enough Wi-Fi networks that we know that there's a limit as to what you can control, especially if you have neighbors or other people that come in with their own Wi-Fi devices, and then you lose control over that. CBRS just gives you that quality of experience that you can't get anywhere else. And finally is security, right? It's the fact that you have your own network, that the data stays with your network, and that it's end-to-end encryption, the whole way from that SIM card in the device all the way up to the core network. It's all encrypted and secure. Those are really three main reasons why people choose networks in many verticals, but they choose to deploy CBRS, where they could have Wi-Fi and other things.
Thanks, Juan. That's a really interesting way to look at it. Boris, please share with us some of the use cases you're working on and focusing on.
Sure, thanks. So I'm the poor bastard that gets to go alone and last. So, so from our standpoint, I would say that there's been two general buckets for use cases. The first is the private cellular or private LTE or enterprise LTE, as you would call it, bucket. And to kind of echo some of the things that other folks said, I think that coverage and security are the killer features there, because if you look at like a large enterprise IT organization, typically the IT organization would run like the network for the employees and the guests, and then typically there is a whole separate like security network, right? So that controls like access control systems, cameras, sensors, and things like that. And there are certain verticals, such as we have a number of customers in the utility space, for instance, where this is like very clearly pronounced, right? So they have a network for everybody, and then a network for special use cases, such as people walking around with tablets and taking pictures of the different parts of the power plant and the water flow and the hydropower plant and things like that. So that all goes through the separate network. So having this secure, dedicated network, that's been the private LTE, so to speak. And the other one is a little bit less obvious, but kind of promising in our view, is there is a number of kind of parties that historically have been kind of a part of the larger MNO value chain, such as, MVNOs or satellite and cable operators that have sold backhaul to MNOs, et cetera, that now with, it being easier, I would say, to build a smaller scale greenfield LTE network of their own, are starting to look to, create islands of coverage and build these, independent networks, sometimes in partnerships with an MNO, sometimes independently on together, just using CBRS shared spectrum and kind of getting additional monetization to the existing assets that they've grown over time. So these are the two I would say that we've seen so far.
Thanks for that, Boris. You did a good job. By the way, you were not last.
Oh, okay. Well, then,
but
that poor guy that's going after me.
I know. Okay. So with that, Deepak, would you please share with? So I have to say something that I found very interesting about Federated Wireless. I think Federated Wireless sees about half of the CBRS connections. I don't know how much you know about them, but please share with us some of the use cases that you're aware of in your role at Federated.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. I've spoken to many customers over the last couple of years, and I think one thing I found with enterprise use cases that it's not one size fits all. It's very obvious. And a lot of customers don't particularly, I would say they care about it, the cost and the simplicity, etc., of the IT network that you put in, but they really care about their operation technologies. They care about the devices, the end use case. So I would say that the aspects of private wireless networks that really resonates is the private part. The fact that, hey, I can have a network for my mission critical equipment like robots or AGVs or security cameras that don't have to contend with interference from a general network that everyone can get onto. So we do see a lot of warehouse, manufacturing, those kind of use cases that fall in that category. Can we have a network which is private, secure, and which I can now dedicate for a very mission critical application? The other use cases stem from, I think, responding to our times, pretty unique times we live in. These are, getting over the digital divide, as someone mentioned earlier. Libraries, public libraries, trying to light up their parking lots to enable people to come in and access the internet. School districts trying to light up students' homes who are underserved in terms of access to the internet. Also managing workplace, COVID restrictions, etc. So we see a lot of the use cases centered around responding to our times. There's one other interesting use case I find that interesting. Also probably, partly because of some of the COVID restrictions, is digital signage. There are a lot of fast serve restaurants that are switching to more heavily depending on their, drive-through. And so they want to light up these signs and make them more interactive and provide a better user experience. And they find that CBRS is a good option to light up these, digital signage. So that's one I found quite interesting as I talk to these customers.
Thank you, Deepak. That is a digital signage. That is an interesting one. Okay, let's shift to a new topic. So I think most of the audience knows that the US-based 3.5 gigahertz spectrum, CBRS spectrum, needs to use a SAS service, like we've heard from CommScope and Federated. But in order to run cellular systems, there are a variety of functions that are required to make them work. And what I'd like to do is ask the panelists to share with us what other services are available in the marketplace to enable private LTE and CBRS. And if you could just briefly touch on the idea that when is it advantageous to offer these services like cloud services versus, you know, an on-premise system versus, let's say, mobile service provider delivered systems. And then let's just say in a minute or less, can you also discuss other, you know, considerations for the business model when you're talking about whether it delivers a service or on-prem or whatever. The idea is, I think each of the companies here has slightly different approach to the marketplace and is offering different parts of the value chain. And so I'd like to ask Rajeev from Celona to start and see how we do with this question.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. I mean, this is, you know, a very foundational question for us at Celona, because part of the reason we exist as a company is prior to starting Celona, I was Deepak's colleague over at Federated. And he and I were actually going around trying to enable private networks a fair amount. And our observation in the founding team at Celona was you needed a slightly different approach. And so what we have done at Celona is we have said, as an enterprise customer, you should not have to go to more than one party. If the way you are used to consuming any of your enterprise technologies, whether it's Wi-Fi, LAN, SD-WAN, you should be able to consume this technology as well through the same partner set in a very similar operational model, in a very similar business model. So that's what we do at Celona. We essentially deliver a single as-a-service subscription model that caters to the entire stack from the RAN to the necessary software elements, whether it is the core, the subscriber management, the SIMs, the SaaS packaging, how do you manage it with SON, how do you actually operationally manage it? And in 2020, if you look at where cloud and enterprise technology is, then there is no more concept of element management. And so how do you take the management to really a service delivery platform is really what we focus on at Celona. And that's what we believe that is the only real known way to getting a new technology to scale in the enterprise market across all of these users that we talked about. So that's the way we have done it. And that's one of the foundational tenets, as I said, but it leads to other advantages. Once you're able to do that, once you have that vertically integrated stack to deliver this, you can now, number one, as I said, improve the integration efficiency. But number two, you can start delivering the network infrastructure as a platform for application developers. And that's something that we will consistently continue to enhance. Because like we have all said, all of this interest from the customers is not just for delivering connectivity for the sake of connectivity. So we don't have to just expand our audience to include more network engineers, but we have to actually elevate those network engineers in those organizations to solving the business critical problems. And that needs a fundamental relook at the architecture. So we have to move away as an industry from delivering point solutions, in our opinion. So that's kind of what our opinion is. One of the side elements of that is I try to avoid using some of the terminology about what are the components. So I have tried my level best to stay away from describing this as, you know, RAN and core and eNode B. By the way, I just found out what eNode B, how it got its name. And that is one of the most fun stories ever. And when I describe that, I think that is a perfect symptom for why we should stay away from these terminologies. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thanks for that, Rajeev. Let's see if we have some extra time and you can share with us. I don't actually know that one either, and I've covered that industry for quite some time. Okay, thanks, Rajeev. Juan from CommScope, would you please share with us your views on, you know, premise versus cloud business model?
Sure. I'll cover both of those. I mean, when it comes to premise or cloud, it really is what we've seen so far. And remember, we're on the radio piece, so we're always on premise, fortunately. But we do partner with core component partners, companies who do the core, and they tend to offer it in two buckets. You know, where the cloud is on the core is in the cloud. And before I mentioned about end-to-end security, right? Which means that everything on the device, all the way from that SIM card, all the way up to that core is encrypted. and that's really great. But now as an enterprise, you have to think about, okay, that means that all that data, if I have a video camera that's capturing data, it's all secure, that's great, but it's also all encrypted all the way up to that core. And if that core happens to be in the cloud, then that means that that data is not available to you as an enterprise until it gets to the cloud, and it might be outside of your own firewall, outside of the enterprise. So many of them have looked at this and said, okay, I like the security. However, I don't like the fact that my data is actually leaving my enterprise, my premises, and going out to some kind of cloud service. So the industry responded, and many of the companies who are here on this panel came up with really good solutions, which basically add an edge server to that core, so that the data plane gets basically, it's called local data offload. The data stays locally within the premises. It can be controlled centrally and all that. But we found that that's really, really important to these customers, especially if you're in the financial markets. Even things like schools, they have all kinds of filters and things for the kids. They don't want all that stuff to go on out to the internet. They want to keep it and apply their own filters and all that. So for them, it's really important. Now, when it comes to the question on the business case, it's really about CapEx versus OpEx. And in most of the cases, what these our customers that we've seen, what they want to do is they want to avoid the OpEx that comes with going with a mobile operator. In the case of the schools, a lot of these school districts, they can go out and get MiFis and give them to the students, and they all sit on the Verizon or AT&T network. But that means that now they have an OpEx that's going to go on forever. By doing their own private LTE network using CBRS, now they take some of that OpEx, they put it into CapEx, and at some point there's a break even. We've seen numbers as low as 18 months when they say, yep, we pay off for this entire network, and after that, all that money goes back into our coffers. So it really depends on the enterprise, but those are some examples that I've seen.
That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing the payback calculations you've done. I wasn't aware of those. That's new information for me. Deepak from Federated, would you share with us your views on premise versus cloud and the business models that we can pursue with enterprise wireless?
Yes, that's an interesting question. I think most of us who are, some of us are technologists, and we have spent a lot of time building networks and creating, in some cases, that fat pipe, the low latency pipe. But I find that talking to customers that, you have to think about the solution. So it's more about the solution, not the connectivity part. And when you start thinking solution, you quickly realize that whether it's edge, on-prem, private cloud, public cloud, these are just different frameworks, but you have to come up with the right combination that solves the problem. And in fact, I found that going in an open mind, listening to the customer often helps, because you realize that the video analytics running in the public cloud that worked for one person didn't work for the other person because they really want it done on the edge. So I think a solution focus and seeing all these, and we are in a pretty interesting, and we are fortunate to have so many tools, open source tools, tools that run on the edge in the cloud. So finding the right combination of tools to create that solution for the customer that solves the customer's problem, I think that's the right mindset, as opposed to favoring one or the other, whether it's edge or on-prem or public cloud. On the business side, I think I clearly see that people are looking for simplicity. For example, when people realize that they don't have to pay for every byte consumed, that's like they get very excited. Like, okay, yeah, so this is my own network. I can do whatever I want with it. So I think coming up with simple business model that the customer can internalize and say, hey, this meets my requirements. And on the CapEx OpEx business, I found that although some customers want to avoid the headache of maintaining a network and would love a service model and are willing to live with the OpEx model, some are much more, hey, for different reasons, I would like to buy this stuff and own this stuff. So again, those are just mechanisms. You have to go in with that mindset. Like, what does it take to solve the customer's problem? But I do see that quite a few people are open to considering all of the general cloud as a service model. That's very interesting to observe.
Thanks, Deepak. I got it. That's an interesting way to look at it. Boris, would you care to share your views on premise versus cloud and business models that you can pursue with private cellular?
Yeah. So I think that when kind of characterizing premise versus cloud, the good way to look at it is not about like, is the software hosted on premise or is it in the cloud? It's really about, do you want to deal with all the different building blocks and have the atomic control over the solution and host it on premise yourself? Or do you want to do the cloud experience, which is kind of everything is taken care of for you and as a service and buy just the outcome, right? So now thinking about it in this framework, I think when it comes to CBRS private LTE, the cloud model or delivering like as a service private LTE or private 5G experience is particularly disruptive value proposition, because with LTE in general, like we have this is an industry that historically has started revolving exclusively around large MNOs. And because of who the customers were, the entire industry was built around like that premise, right? So you have like a handful of tier 1 providers and everybody's selling into the tier 1 provider. And the big companies primarily that offer different things in this industry are designed to deal with large projects. And because of that, they are super siloed. So you were talking about all the different components that go into building the private LTE network. So if you go to like, Ericsson or Nokia and you talk to somebody who's dealing with RAN, like these guys have no idea about anything that has to do with core and no idea that has to do with SIM cards. And there's a bunch of people that do SIM cards that know nothing about the core. So actually, if you're looking to deliver, like a private LTE in a smaller form factor, end to end, it's like the way that the industry historically has been built, it's very hard to do. There's a lot of these very complicated components, and within the historic talent pools within the industry, there are very few people that know the whole thing end to end. And because of that, I think that there's big promise in the as a service delivery model for private LTE, more so probably than virtually any other kind of as a service technology offering. So that's just my thoughts.
Thanks, Boris. That's a really interesting way to look at it. Oguz, would you care to share your views on the merits of premise versus cloud and the various business models one can pursue for private cellular?
Sure, certainly. I kind of agree with what Deepak was talking about. So it is not really an either-or story here. It is both, because at the end of the day, we have to look at it in the following manner. We are trying to provide connectivity services for enterprises, but why are we doing that? That effectively tells us that the current connectivity solution that they have has some gaps. And why are those gaps now becoming more prominent? Because enterprises are going through a transformation themselves. And that transformation is actually bringing in maybe 3 really big buckets in connectivity that we need to provide. We need to provide security, the capability for privacy, and performance-related issues in terms of low latency, mission criticality, etc. So when you look at it from these 3 buckets, different enterprises are going to have different requirements for all these 3. If privacy is really important for an enterprise, that definitely means there needs to be an on-prem solution. But if it is less important, then you can provide that entire solution from the cloud. But at the same time, the whole issue, regardless of where the individual components are in this solution, is a multi-cloud solution, because this is a connectivity solution. And in addition to connecting the end devices, you need to be thinking about what you're connecting these devices to. And that is the enterprise edge applications or applications that they would like to utilize from the cloud. And a programmable means of matching the end users to these applications and giving the enterprise the capability to programmatically control their networks in a sandbox way is important. So regardless of it, whether it is on-prem or from the cloud or a hybrid solution, we have to be thinking from a managed service perspective, because you should not expect the enterprises to start all of a sudden knowing the ins and outs of 3GPP networks. You want to make sure that that is abstracted out in such a way that they can be ignorant of all of that and still be able to control their networks.
Yeah, I can't imagine having a 3GPP class for people in IT. That would be a tough one. Thanks for that, Oguz. Todd, I wonder, have you brought any more props for this question, or are we going to have to rely only on words and concepts?
Yeah, I can bring some more props if you like. But let's, when you started out the question, you also mentioned something about CBRS in North America only. And one thing, I'll comment on the thread related to cloud versus premise, because I think there's a meritorious point to be made there. But let's keep in mind that private wireless isn't new. It's been done in our industry for many, many years. And there's other wireless technologies that are made available to set up private wireless initiatives, including in the US, right? The DoD has independent wireless cellular technologies that can be used that we're working on. The critical infrastructure has access to Band 8 now to enable essentially private critical infrastructure monitoring. So it's not new, and that includes outside the US, right? Today you can get access to buckets of in-building spectrum depending on where you go in Europe, and it's changing very, very quickly there. To enable these private networks. So that's not solely about CBRS. CBRS is kind of the first mechanism of its kind, and I could say it's kind of under the microscope of the world right now to see how well Deepak does in managing all that spectrum. No, but I think there's many uses of it, and I think the points made about enterprises not being ready or capable of running this themselves is correct. Look, no matter how simple we make our PowerPoint slide, the fact is building a cellular private network is complicated, right? There are many things that can go awry. And we all know that, and we know that there's many acronyms that are new to the audience, and there's many parts you have to kind of plug together to make this work. So we find that the same, that there's a lot of education on how this stuff is different, but then what the merits are for your use cases. Now, to the cloud versus on-premise. Look, I don't think either one is the right answer. I think you need to have flexibility to offer both scenarios or a combination of the use cases, depending on what the customer requires. If we stop looking at it through the lens of CBRS and private wireless, and we look at the enterprise through the way they do business in their IT infrastructure today, they have a whole range of public cloud-based applications, private cloud scenarios across multiple site enterprises with private centralized databases or data centers. And then they have 100% on-site applications. So they already do this in a very hybrid way. And I think what happens is certainly when we get engaged with the enterprises, they start to look at it and say, what data has to have a very tight loop? What data am I really concerned about and I do not want it leaving my building? and how can I architect this technology to enable this new secure, private, pervasive connectivity to still protect my business, right? And I think we all well know there are several topologies in which we can do that. None of them being the right answer, effectively all of them being the right answer, and it depends on the customer scenario.
Got it. Okay, so listen to the customer. Message received. Karim, you went first last time, so you get to close out this topic of premise versus cloud versus and business model. Thank you very much, Karim. Take it away.
So Athonet's been doing this for 10 years now, deploying private LTE. So it's really nothing new. I actually remember our first deployment in 2010 was a private LTE network for public safety, and 2011 was a utility, which then actually became our main investor. So actually, what we had to do, I'll give you my experience is what we've had to do was develop the whole software in-house from scratch. We were telco guys who knew that intimately, but knew that we had to rebuild it with a completely new concept in place, which took a massive amount of time. I was really hoping it would have we'd been a lot faster, and it's really, we've been here, for many years, 10 years trying to, get this going, and I'm glad we got to this point where the market is really hot. But we've built everything in-house because we knew that flexibility, like others said, is fundamental. You have people in an airport who are deployed in a major, one of the world's biggest airports, right, in the world, in mines, in all sorts of places around the world. And in fact, not only in the US, from Australia to Europe to Latin America. What they really want is flexibility. You have to be able to run in different situations according to the use case. The airport's requirements are completely different from the school, right? And I can tell you from a fact, because we're deployed in both of those cases. And there's really three types of deployments, right? There's you can put it all in the cloud and keep it really, really simple. And we're doing this with 5G to bootstrap really the environment. You have a 5G radio, connect to us. It's running immediately where you are. There's a hybrid model, which is the one that won us 4 Global Mobile Awards, which was unique for the telco industry, realizing that the cloud is actually a fact, where you can be hybrid, part at the edge, the so-called mobile edge computing, joining the cloud. And then for the on-site, for those who really, really don't want to have anything running on the cloud, which there's still some players there, but the cloud is now becoming part of everybody's play in the enterprise. So having deployed many networks, I think that the flexibility is really fundamental there, but not only in the core, right, in the radio as well. Sometimes we need an indoor radio. Sometimes you need a macro radio to cover the whole of the airport in a very simple way, because it's a massive area to be covered, outdoor, indoor. So even the radios, I think I'm not a big fan of complete verticalization, because you never know what the customer may want, and you have to be flexible. And in fact, there's a lot of integrators in this market that are specialized in their given sector, UGVs in a port and so on, right? They know what they need. They know why Wi-Fi doesn't really fit. And what we really want to do is give them all the tools to be able to deliver on that. With on the business side, the right approach, which is an enterprise approach, very different from the telco approach, which is a big CapEx, right? With, I'll send you 10 engineers, right? 15 engineers on site to manage the network. Completely the opposite. In fact, the word managed services sometimes scares off customers, because you got to be careful. They don't want you to lock them in. In fact, you got to give them the keys. You give them the car with the keys. Here it is. You run with it. I'll help you, right? We're supporting over 500,000 SIM cards around the world. You support them, but they really don't like the fact that you've completely locked them in. You've given them a turnkey, complete locked-in solution, and they're stuck, right? So the cloud really helps you in that, because of the automation and the fact that it's a platform as a service, and therefore they're allowed eventually to switch, to change, to maybe go from on-site to cloud. I think that'll be more and more important in our industry.
Thanks, Karim. That's really interesting. Yeah, the lock-in is something I've heard about as well. I appreciate you bringing that up and raising the point. Okay, we are approaching the end, and I'd like to ask each of our panelists to address something that I think could be considered in some ways sort of a marketing-related question. That is, how does 5G enter into the equation for enterprise focused cellular. And do you have any quick predictions on how the market may evolve from LTE to 5G? And the reason I bring up 5G as a marketing thing is the MNOs are marketing 5G quite significantly to consumers. Now we're talking about enterprises taking this technology on. So I'd like to ask Deepak to share your very quick views on how 5G enters into the equation.
Yes, so I think that 5G as pertaining to private wireless networks and with especially an enterprise focus, I think is quite different than 5G deployments that we see in more macro settings. In the enterprise private wireless, I think let me bring up another topic that is relevant, which is comparison to Wi-Fi, right? Most of us have been in conversations where this comparison is inevitable, right? And often the right answer, I think most people agree that it is not a rip and replace. These are coexisting solutions. So I see the 5G coming in a few different ways. One bucket is 5G does allow you to do a few things that you couldn't do before, right? Especially around segmentation, using more flexible sort of techniques like network slicing, etc. So 5G has a role to, has a way to allow you to do things that you couldn't do before with an incumbent technology. There are other aspects of 5G that just helps you solve a problem better. So whether it is latency for an AGV in a manufacturing facility, so that a customer is generally happy with what they have, but they would like to improve as they're trying to get more ROI out of their AGV investments or robots. They want to come up with a more low latency solution, for example. So that's an area where 5G can help them do something better. And then there are definitely areas where I think 5G, especially around device onboarding, etc., where you probably want to do what Wi-Fi does and does very well, right? Or existing technologies do very well. So so the way I see 5G coming into the private enterprise with private networks as on CBRS is, again, you'll have to, it'll find its niche. It'll solve some problems better. It'll help you solve some problems that you didn't think was possible to solve properly. And in some cases, you do what is being done because it works, and you don't necessarily need to invent more stuff. The one aspect that I think applies to all technologies, whether it's 5G, Wi-Fi, whatever, is the use of intelligence. I think there's a lot of focus on machine learning, AI, that kind of stuff. And I think there are many, specifically focusing on 5G, there are many aspects that I think can lead to much better use of intelligence for managing these networks very seamlessly and providing a better user experience to the customers.
Thanks, Deepak. That's really interesting. Boris, could you please share your views on the transition to 5G? And we're approaching the end here, so let's, if you are able to rapidly share your views, we'd appreciate that.
I'll be quick, yeah. So I think that 5G is this massive marketing term that is grossly misunderstood, with 99% of the people thinking that 5G equals millimeter wave. So it's like, 5G is going to enable me to do, 10x the bandwidth at, 1/10 the latency, and that's kind of the selling value proposition. I think that the application for that is limited simply because the number of use cases where you absolutely need this crazy bandwidth and ridiculously low latency is limited. And I'm not fully bought into this, like, let's make it happen, and then all of a sudden we'll have all these use cases type thing. But 5G is not just millimeter wave. Millimeter wave is just a feature, right, of 5G. 5G, first and foremost, for us, is actually a completely new, very software-centric kind of cloud-native architecture for the mobile network with complete disaggregation from the hardware. And through that, it allows to do a lot of interesting things, such as slicing and other stuff, but also it actually significantly brings down the costs of building a new network, because you no longer have a network that is comprised of, large bulky appliances. You have the software part of the network, and then you have hardware part of the network, which in many layers is increasingly becoming more and more commoditized, which brings down the cost and gives an in for, like open source solutions like the ones that we're working on. And that is the part of 5G that we are truly excited about at FreedomFi.
Thank you, Boris. That's a very interesting way to look at it. Karim, would you share your views on the transition to 5G briefly, please?
Yeah, if I can answer with the question, which 5G do you mean? Yeah, I agree, with the previous comments that 5G is a misunderstood term. What does it mean? People call it to mean anything. So I've even used it earlier, and I said 5G without even thinking about it. And I typically, when I say 5G, I mean the real 5G, which is not even there for most, which is what's been launched in the iPhone 12, right? The proper 5G. Mostly because it sometimes gets confused, and it confuses people with what's the 5G that the operators have just launched. Well, it's not the real 5G. Very often it's the 5G we call NSA. Let's forget the technical terms, but anyway, the limitation that you need more spectrum to be able to run it from an enterprise point of view, right? So we're seeing 5G becoming very important in certain parts of the world, Germany, Japan, a lot due to spectrum, right, where there is no choice. You're going to go that way. And this is the reason for us launching, our 5G, our full 5G, product there. But it's really, I think I agree with the previous comments that it's really, what are your requirements, right? The flexibility, what do you need? There's less terminal, the terminals are starting out now on 5G. Soon they're going to build out more. What do you want to do? And the important thing that we try to point out is your choice needs to be forward-looking. You need to make a choice whether it's 4G, start 4G and then migrate, but have a clear migration path so that your solutions can actually migrate and give you, exactly what you need, independently of the spectrum and the parts of the world that you're in. Whether it's a fully cloud service, as we said before, sure, you need to have a migration between the two. And you're probably going to be able to have to run 4G and 5G alongside for a while. So it really, the answer to the question on what is 5G, I'm not quite sure, depending on who's talking, but certainly it's becoming important. The real 5G is becoming important in a lot of areas of this world.
Yeah, it is confusing, Karim. That's why I said that's why I brought it up as maybe it's marketing, but we have to talk about it because I think it'll help the industry move forward. Rajeev, would you please share your views on the transition to 5G?
I think Boris and Karim really hit upon a couple of two very important points. I think 5G, we have to start distinguish between 5G radio and the 5G architecture. I think the 5G architecture, if somebody is implementing something from scratch today, is being implemented by multiple people. You can leverage a lot of the advantages of the 5G architecture with a 4G radio today if done from scratch and properly, right? And so I think that has been our advice and guidance to our customers and prospects to say you absolutely can use capabilities like network slicing. You absolutely can use capabilities like a hybrid cloud model. You can absolutely have a different data path implementation per application on the same network, dynamically orchestrated using AI today. There is no reason to wait for all of these amazing capabilities. And I think when you then take that construct and then apply exactly what Karim said, which is in reality, over the next 3 to 5 years, there is going to be a mix of 4G and 5G devices in the enterprise ecosystem. So you have to think about having both of those radio technologies on a single converged platform that can actually give you a path over the next few years to meeting your business needs. There is no other way for an enterprise to really consume this. But it is important to delineate those thoughts. I think I have to agree with Karim. You have to invest in a platform that gets you ready. I think the real key here is you're adding a private mobile platform. You're not adding just a radio technology. If I look back to the early days of Wi-Fi, one of the mistakes incumbents made is thinking of it as just a radio access technology, not realizing that it has long-lasting implications in the core of your network, in your security architecture, in your operational models. I think private mobile networks are going to do something very similar. it is going to impact the entire network stack inside the enterprise network. And if you do not think through that entire implication, then you will be in this short-sighted thinking of, I'm doing 4G today, 5G tomorrow. That's not the reality. The reality is you are now thinking of a private mobile network end-to-end. I wanted to touch upon one other thing related to this somewhat. The previous question of cloud versus on-prem really starts to become a true gray area in the 5G world. Because I think 5G is probably the first networking technology that has been thought of from grounds up to blur those lines. And so I think you're starting to see that in these discussions about investing in a platform which is 5G ready. You need to really, those cloud versus edge. One of my opinions, which is somewhat in contrary to some of the things mentioned earlier, is a platform needs to be investigated that is flexible, that can dynamically adjust to customers' needs, because you cannot expect that customers' needs are so static that you can go ask them, hey, would you like on-prem or would you like cloud? That answer is going to change in 2 days, and then will change again in 6 days. So we cannot expect for these platforms to be that static and be that reactive to needs. You need to build something that's highly adaptive. And I think 5G has got the potential for doing that. But you need to really build a platform from grounds up for the future, not for the past.
Rajeev, I think you did a good job of addressing not only the technical, but also the marketing aspects of 5G. Good job. Juan, would you please share your views on the transition to 5G? Thank you.
Sure. I mean, actually, to a lot of our customers, when they get a private cellular network, they call it 5G. They are doing 5G services. And, every once in a while, they'll get a consultant coming in and saying, well, what about 5G NR, which is the actual radio technology? But even if you look at that, typically the question is not 4G versus 5G. It's really all about Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi 6, really, which delivers gigabit type of speeds. And with the new spectrum at 6 gigahertz that's going to be opened up, they're going to have even more capacity. But again, we always have to explain, private networks is about the quality of the experience. CBRS and private networks are not going to win by speed. That's not the name of the game here. You use them for the particular purpose because of coverage, security, and quality of experience. Now, sometimes we'll get into discussions as to, well, I want a network that's faster. Oh, okay, well, I think some of you alluded to it here. Well, there's fast 5G, right, which is what Verizon and AT&T have, a millimeter wave. And the reason really has very little to do with the technology itself. It's the fact that they have a lot of spectrum out there, right? When you're up in the millimeter wave, nobody else is there because it doesn't go very far. And then you have slow 5G, which is T-Mobile, right? They're doing it at the low bands, and the speeds are no different than LTE, or mostly what people experience out there. But you go back to so that's the radio network. And the reality is that most enterprises, they just don't have access to millimeter wave. It's not theirs. They didn't bid, billions of dollars for that spectrum. So the spectrum they do have is CBRS. And then the question is, well, how much benefit would putting 5G NR technology on the CBRS band brings them when the spectrum is really limited? They do have to share with other people. And by the end of the day, you pretty much end up with about the same speeds as you get with LTE. What's more important though, is that core network and the discussion that we have about on-prem and off-prem, because the second big benefit that they always talk about when they talk about 5G is, well, I want network slicing and low latency. And what they realize is that the latency benefit, it's huge when you put that core network, you move it from the mobile operator, which sits out in the cloud somewhere, and you put it into your on-prem, your latency benefit, it's incredible once you do that. So that's why they call it 5G. And then, we kind of joke around, well, network slicing, you don't have to slice it. It's your entire network. You get the whole pie. That's the kind of discussion that we have with them. It is your own network. You divide it up however you want. So in many cases, they really do believe that this is giving them 5G. This is, to them, they means I don't have to buy the cellular network from the mobile operator. I can just deploy it myself, run it myself, and really get all of the benefits of 5G.
Thanks, Juan. That's really interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting comment you made about slicing. I like that. Todd, would you please share your views on the transition to 5G, please?
Sure. Well, let me start by saying that everything we're deploying in CBRS today is already 5G, or at least 5G ready. And the reason for that is because the way we've architected the platform is, you know, and I think Boris, you made the comment about the software element of it. All the core capabilities, all the modulation, the full stack and everything in our platform has been built as a software platform that runs on off-the-shelf servers in their data center. As a result of that, it's very easy to transition that via software changes over time. So as there's capabilities of merit that are of benefit to the enterprise, they can take advantage of that. And look, we as an industry, we talk a lot about 5G from the perspective of what do we have. If I'm an operator and I own a lot of millimeter wave spectrum, I position it that way, to your point, Boris. If I'm an operator and I have a lot of low band spectrum, I position it that way. It gets positioned as speed. It gets positioned at low latency. I almost never run into an enterprise who starts by saying, I need 5G. That's what I need. What they need is to solve some of their work stream issues, and their work stream issues have persistent connectivity things. Sometimes they have latency things. To Juan's point about the network, 5G in and itself may not solve a network latency issue if I'm traversing packets across a broad network somewhere. So local packet handling in responsive networks becomes really important. And I have use cases where low latency is really important. In fact, life or death important, depending on the control systems. So you know, in terms of 5G and the transformation, we look at it as a software change. And we try and architect everything in our products to be able to allow customers to take advantage of that. You know, there was a comment on, I think, Juan, on slicing. Well, here's the funny thing is, people build networks today and they essentially virtualize layers on those IP networks for the purposes of segmentation, tracking, security, etc. And many times, the mere fact that we don't virtualize what's in the air is because, well, maybe there's not enough to virtualize that or to slice it. And we kind of take it as, look, we've, as a country, we've given organizations 150 megahertz of potential capacity to utilize within their enterprises. And we should enable them to take full advantage of as much of that as they possibly can and not limit them on what's possible. So, you know, in some cases, when I'm talking to IT-oriented organizations, I explain to them that I essentially can take chunks of the spectrum, whether it be only 5 megahertz or whether it be 60 megahertz, and we can map that back into your VLAN on your network and set quality of service end to end. And I describe it as really extending VLANs into the air in your facility. And they can rhyme with that, right? They understand it. So, you know, all the way back to how we pitch this stuff, a lot of times the enterprise customer doesn't really understand anything about 3GPP, but we need to continue to tie 5G and what it means back to enterprise value as we continue to evolve and talk to them. And I think that's probably a critical thing, because we'll have a lot of variability and a lot of posturing and positioning on what 5G really is going on in our industry for some time to come. And really, in private wireless, it comes back to what can I really use it for, and why is it valuable, and what are the features that make a difference.
Thanks, Todd. That's a really really good way to look at it. I appreciate sharing that. Okay, Oz, you get the last word here today, and I appreciate your comments on the transition to 5G.
Most of what I had in mind has already been discussed, but one thing to add is regardless of whether actually from a radio perspective, an enterprise needs 5G today or not, an enterprise that gets into the deployment of a private cellular network will want migration to 5G sooner or later. So it all boils down to the platform then, because when the time comes for them to want to migrate to 5G, you want to be able to offer that migration to a large extent with a software upgrade. And that effectively means you need an underlying platform which is built around disaggregation, programmability, and cloudification. And in addition to that, the platform itself needs to actually follow the cloud principles. You need to be able to have an automated CI/CD pipeline that allows you to add new features without necessarily taking the network down, so that enterprises can, as new features are requested by the enterprises towards 5G, those features can be added while the experience is still ongoing. And that is the whole story about really migrating to 5G. Just like the LTE name suggests, it is going to be an evolution. And that evolution needs to follow using the right platform, cloud fundamentals.
Thanks, Oguz, very much. Appreciate your views on this. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining today. Thanks, big thanks to Deepak, Boris, Karim, Rajeev, Juan, Todd, and Oguz. And it's very nice to meet everybody here today. And thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.